The old church bell rang out across the small town, not in celebration, but in silence. The wooden doors stood wide open, rows of flowers lining the walkway, but the air was heavy with absence. Guests had already left. The groom was gone, and so was the promise of what should have been a perfect day. Inside, at the very front, where hours ago she had dreamed of walking down the aisle, sat a woman in her ivory wedding gown. Her makeup was smudged, her hands clutched the wilted bouquet, and her eyes stared at the floor as if it might offer an answer she couldn't find in herself. She looked fragile yet strong, broken yet unbowed. Her name was Isabella Hartfield, though in that moment, she felt like no one at all. On the sidewalk outside the church, a man passed by carrying his little girl on his shoulders. His clothes were faded from too many washes, his shoes scuffed from long hours of work, but his smile for his daughter was the kind that could light up a tired soul. His name was Daniel Brooks, a widowed father struggling to make ends meet. He had taken his daughter, Lily, out for ice cream as a rare treat, though he wasn't sure how he would stretch the week's groceries after spending those few dollars. As they passed the open doors, Daniel slowed. Something pulled at him. Maybe it was the sight of the decorations left behind, maybe it was the haunting quiet of a place that should have been filled with laughter. Lily tugged at his hair playfully, but he gently lifted her down and said, "Wait here a moment, sweetheart." Peering inside, he saw her, the woman in the gown, sitting utterly alone. He almost turned away, thinking it was none of his business. But then he remembered the nights he himself had sat in silence, after losing his wife to illness, wondering if the world even noticed his grief. He knew the weight of loneliness. So he stepped inside. His footsteps echoed softly against the empty wooden floor. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes still glistening with tears. "I'm sorry," Daniel said gently, raising his hands as if not to intrude. "I just saw you sitting here. Are you okay?" Isabella gave a broken laugh, one that carried more sorrow than humor. "Do I look okay?" she whispered. Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "No. You look like someone carrying a weight too heavy for one person." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lily, curious, wandered in and gasped. "Daddy, she's a princess." The little girl's eyes widened at the sight of the gown, and she ran forward, her innocence cutting through the heaviness of the moment. Isabella blinked at the child. "Princess?" "Yes." Lily grinned. "Only princesses wear dresses like that." For the first time all day, Isabella's lips curved into the faintest smile. She lowered herself to the little girl's height and said softly, "Well, maybe today, I needed someone to remind me of that." Daniel watched the exchange with a quiet warmth. He could see Isabella's heartbreak, but also the flicker of light that his daughter had managed to spark in her. They sat together, the three of them, in that empty church. Slowly, Isabella told her story. The man she had loved, the wedding that was planned for months, the cruel abandonment just hours before the ceremony. "He said he wasn't ready," she whispered, tears streaming down again. "Not ready for commitment. Not ready for me." Daniel listened, not with pity, but with understanding. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people walk away not because you're unworthy, but because they are afraid of someone who actually deserves love. It doesn't mean you're not enough. It means they weren't strong enough." Isabella stared at him, as though the stranger before her had just spoken the words she had needed all along. Lily leaned against Isabella's gown and yawned. "Don't be sad, princess. Daddy says when people hurt us, we can grow flowers in the broken places." Daniel flushed. He had told Lily that once, years ago, after her mother died. Hearing her repeat it now, to this stranger, made his chest ache with pride and sorrow. Something shifted in Isabella's heart that evening. A poor father and his little girl had given her more comfort than all the wealth and friends she had ever known. Because Isabella, though Daniel didn't know it yet, wasn't just any bride. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest business families in the city, an heiress with more money than she could ever spend. And yet, in that church, none of it mattered. What mattered was kindness. Days turned into weeks. Isabella found reasons to cross paths with Daniel and Lily. Sometimes she would accidentally bump into them at the park, sometimes she would invite Lily to help her bake cookies, sometimes she would simply listen as Daniel talked about his long shifts at the repair shop and his worries about paying rent. She never told him who she really was. She wanted him to know her heart, not her fortune. Slowly, quietly, Isabella fell in love. Not the dazzling, picture-perfect love she had once dreamed of, but something deeper. The way Daniel always saved the last bite of food for his daughter. The way he carried himself with humility despite hardship. The way he listened, really listened, when she spoke. But Daniel, for all his warmth, kept his distance. He admired Isabella, yes. He was grateful for her kindness, certainly. But she was radiant, elegant, and mysterious. And he was just a poor dad, trying to give his little girl a life he could barely afford. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, Isabella finally asked, "Daniel, why do you always look at me like I'm someone who belongs in another world?" Daniel sighed, brushing his hands over his worn jeans. "Because you do. Look at you, Isabella. You're beautiful, graceful. You deserve someone who can give you everything. I can barely give my daughter enough." Isabella's throat tightened. She wanted to scream the truth, that she could give him everything, that she had more than enough wealth to erase his struggles. But she didn't. Because love, she knew, wasn't about riches. It was about choice. The breaking point came one night when Daniel's landlord threatened eviction. He sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, wondering how to explain to Lily that they might lose their home. Isabella arrived, uninvited, carrying groceries. When she saw his despair, she placed her hand gently on his. "Daniel," she whispered, "let me help you." He shook his head fiercely. "No. I can't take charity from you. I can't let you pity us." "It's not pity," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "It's love." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Daniel looked at her, really looked, and saw not a woman above him, but a woman beside him. "I don't understand," he said softly. Isabella took a deep breath. "Because I haven't told you everything. Daniel. I'm not just a woman who was left at the altar. I'm Isabella Hartfield. My family, we own Hartfield Enterprises." Daniel's eyes widened. He had seen the name on skyscrapers, on billboards. He couldn't process it. "I didn't tell you," Isabella continued, "because I didn't want you to see my wealth before you saw me. I wanted you to know the real me, the woman who cried in that church, the woman your daughter called a princess. And I wanted to know if you could love me, not for what I have, but for who I am." Daniel's chest tightened. Everything in him wanted to push her away, to protect his pride, his dignity. But then Lily, with her sleepy eyes and simple wisdom, tugged his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "princesses don't need castles. They need someone who loves them." And in that moment, Daniel understood. He didn't see a millionaire. He didn't see a woman above his reach. He saw Isabella, the woman who had sat with him in his darkest hours, who had laughed with his daughter, who had reminded him what hope felt like. He took her hand. "Then stay," he whispered. "Not as someone who can fix my life, but as someone who can be in it." Tears streamed down Isabella's cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. The three of them embraced, not a perfect family, not a fairy tale, but something more real, more powerful. And as they stood together in that small, worn-down apartment, Daniel realized something he had long forgotten: love isn't about what you can give in wealth or status. It's about showing up, staying when it's hard, and choosing each other even when the world says you don't belong. For Isabella, who once thought her life was measured in fortunes, the greatest treasure she ever found was the heart of a poor dad who had nothing to offer but everything she needed.